Hello, my name is Martin. I'm a linguist and a translator. Welcome to my language channel. Today we're going to talk about grammatical categories of verbs. To describe how verbs function, grammarians classify them according to tense, aspect, mood, and voice. Native speakers of English will recognize each of these words, but except for perhaps tense, seldom associate them with grammar. Newcomers to the English language may be familiar with these categories in their native tongue. Let's look at the meaning and function of these four categories. Let's start with tense. Tense is another word for time. The tense of a verb refers to the time in which an action or state of being takes place. The basic verb tenses in English are present, past, and future. That sounds quite straightforward, but English verbs also have many nuances referred to as aspects. Aspect expresses how the action or state of being extends over time. There are four types of verb aspects: simple, progressive, perfect, and perfect progressive. Let's start with the simple aspect of verb tenses. All tenses have a simple aspect that is used to describe an action or state of being without stating whether it is continuous or completed. Here are some examples of simple tenses. The present simple. The students eat lunch together. This sentence just states that they eat. It doesn't say whether they are eating now or if they have eaten, just that they eat. Past simple. Genevieve ate a hot dog with mustard. Here again, no indication of continuation or completion of the action. And there is a future simple. Tomorrow they will eat lunch together again. The next aspect we want to look at is progressive tenses. All tenses have a progressive aspect that is used to describe an action or state of being that is continuous or ongoing. Here are some examples of progressive tenses. Present progressive. The students are eating lunch. This is an ongoing action that is happening in the present. Let's look at the past progressive. Genevieve was eating a hot dog. The same here, ongoing action that was happening in the past. And there's a future progressive. Tomorrow they will be eating lunch together again. Another aspect is that of perfect tenses. All tenses have a perfect aspect that is used to describe the end of an action or state of being that is completed. Here are some examples of perfect tenses. We'll start with the present perfect. The students have eaten lunch together many times. Have eaten indicates an action that occurred in the past and is complete in the present. Now to the past perfect. Genevieve had already eaten when her friends arrived. Had eaten indicates an action that was completed in the past, in this example, when her friends arrived. And there is a future perfect. Tomorrow, the students will have eaten lunch together 3 times this week. This tense indicates an action that will have been completed at some point in the future. As we mentioned at the beginning, verb aspects are all about nuances. All tenses have a perfect progressive aspect that is used to describe the end of an action or state of being that is, was, or will be ongoing. Here are some examples of perfect progressive tenses. We'll start with the present perfect progressive. The students have been eating lunch together all year. This is an ongoing action that is complete at the time that this statement is made. Now we'll look at the past perfect progressive. Genevieve had already been eating when her friends arrived. This describes an action that was ongoing but was completed in the past, in this example, when her friends arrived. And there is also a future perfect progressive. Tomorrow they will have been eating lunch together for 3 months. Now let's talk about emphatic tenses. Present and past tenses also have an emphatic form, which technically is not considered an aspect, but fits in nicely with the description of verb aspects. Emphatic tenses are composed of the present or past tense of the verb to do and the root of the verb as follows. Example number 1, to show emphasis. Yes, I do want to buy that book. Number 2, to ask a question. Did you buy the book already? One doesn't say, bought you the book. And number 3, to make a negative statement. Example, no, I didn't buy it. One doesn't say, I bought it not. Now we're going to talk about mood. Mood is another category that grammarians have identified to describe the speaker's attitude or mood towards what is being said. Is the speaker stating a fact or a hypothetical situation? Is the speaker expressing a wish or a command? Is the statement based on any conditions? There are 4 moods in English: the indicative mood, the imperative mood, the conditional mood, and the subjunctive mood. The first mood we'll look at is the indicative mood. These are the normal statements and questions we use most of the time. They are based on reality from the speaker's standpoint, as opposed to a hypothetical condition or command. Here are some examples of the indicative mood. The Beatles are my favorite band. Did you see them in concert? They came from Liverpool. The band achieved unbelievable success. The second mood we're going to talk about is the imperative mood. This mood can be couched in very polite language, but from a grammatical standpoint, it still expresses a command. It does not describe an existing reality, but gives instructions for an action to be performed. Here are some examples of the imperative mood. Pass me the bread, please. Let me pour you another glass. Let's eat. Go ahead and have some salad. Next, we'll look at the conditional mood. As the name implies, this mood is used to make a statement based on a condition, often in conjunction with a phrase starting with the word if. It is formed by using an auxiliary verb like might, would, should, or could, plus the root of a verb. Here are some examples of the conditional mood. First example, I would love to visit Spain this summer if I could get a good fare. Another example, I might be able to travel if I save enough money. In the next example, the travel brochure should be arriving any day now. The fourth mood we're going to talk about is a subjunctive mood. It is used to make a statement that is contrary to fact or a hypothetical situation, or to express a wish, a demand, or a suggestion. Here are some examples of the subjunctive mood. I suggested that he register as soon as possible. A vibrant democracy requires that every citizen vote. It is not a requirement that you be affiliated with any particular party. Because the English-speaking world has taken a relaxed approach to grammar, the subjunctive is falling into disuse. Many native speakers simply don't understand the differences, but whether you are familiar with the actual grammar or not, the subjunctive mood provides a real opportunity to express nuance. The present subjunctive mood is conjugated by applying the base form or the root of the verb to all persons. I be, you be, he be, etc. I go, you go, she go, I work, you work, he work. In addition, the verb to be has an archaic past subjunctive form, were, that is used in phrases like, if I were a rich man. To underscore the difference between the subjunctive and indicative moods, let's compare some examples. First, let's look at a sentence in the subjunctive mood. It is important that you be here on time. This means you're not here yet, but when you do arrive, it is important to be on time. In the previous statement, the speaker is expressing a recommendation concerning a meeting that has not yet occurred. Let's take a look at the same sentence in the indicative mood. It is important that you are here on time. This means you arrived on time, and that is important. In the following statement, the speaker uses the subjunctive mood to express a recommendation about an invitation that has not been sent. I propose that Dan be invited. This means Dan has not been invited, but I think he should be. In this statement, the speaker uses the indicative mood to express an opinion about an invitation that has already been sent. I propose that Dan is invited. This means I think that Dan has already been invited. As we said in the introduction, aspect adds nuance to the verb, and the subjunctive mood contributes to the greatest degree of nuance. Getting it right is like dotting your I's and crossing your T's. Now let's talk about the voice aspect of a verb. While the term voice doesn't provide any clues as to its function, it simply indicates whether a verb is active or passive. In the active voice, the subject performs the action. Example, the girl hit the ball. In the passive voice, the subject receives the action. Example, the girl was hit by the ball. You can see the difference. Verbs in the active voice can be transitive or intransitive. If the action described by the verb has an object, implied or otherwise, the verb is said to be transitive. If the action does not have an object, the verb is intransitive. Here are some examples of transitive verbs in the active voice. Here, the object is highlighted in blue. May is studying economics. She receives good grades. She usually takes the back row. She finished her assignment. In each of these sentences, you can see that the verb has an object that receives the action. An object can also be implied from the verb in the context without having to be spelled out. Here are some sentences with implied objects shown in brackets. Father cooks for the family. Here the object, dinner, is implied. We eat at around 6 p.m. Here the object, the meal, is implied. Monique stirs while I slice. What is Monique stirring? The food. What is the speaker slicing? The tomatoes. And father watches from behind. Whom is the father watching? Us. If the action described by the verb does not have an object, implied or otherwise, the verb is said to be intransitive. Here are some examples of intransitive verbs in the active voice. May lives on campus. The verb lives does not have an object. She works very hard to get good grades. The verb works does not have an object. She usually sits in the back row. The verb sits does not have an object. She has matured since entering college. The verb has matured does not have an object. All these verbs are intransitive. Because in the passive voice, the subject receives the action, verbs in the passive voice are always transitive. This voice is formed by combining a form of the verb to be with the past participle. Here are some examples of the passive voice. Here the subject is highlighted in red. The soccer field was filled with spectators. The goalkeeper was injured during the skirmish. The goal was scored by Sean. The ball was kicked as a penalty. A tie was called by the referee. Now I want to talk about a feature of English grammar that is a bit untidy, but very common in everyday speech. The subject as an indirect object in the passive voice. The preceding sentences show examples of the subject as a direct object. But in colloquial speech, the passive voice is often used to express the subject as an indirect object in phrases like, we were told, I was informed, she was given. Language professionals, that is teachers and writers and editors, generally agree that this construction should be avoided in writing. But it is explained here because of its prevalence in everyday speech. Let's compare the following statements in the passive and active voices. Passive voice. Marjorie was told by the coach to throw the ball. Active voice. The coach told Marjorie to throw the ball. Although this statement sounds better in the active voice, use of the passive voice is still very common in spoken English. The following comparisons show how the active voice is a much cleaner construction. Passive voice. Bob was sold the computer. Active voice. Bob bought the computer. Passive voice. Bob was explained all the features of the computer. Active voice. The salesperson explained all the features to Bob. Passive voice. Bob was sent a training manual via email. Active voice. The salesperson sent a training manual to Bob. Again, even though this construction is indirect, it is a permanent element of spoken English. Perhaps my advice to you would be to use it in conversation, but remember that the active voice is better when you are writing. After spending a few minutes on the passive voice, I want to talk about a similar verb form, reflexive verbs. Reflexive verbs use reflexive pronouns as their object and are passive in the sense that the subject is the recipient of the action. Some grammarians refer to reflexive verbs as the middle voice. Here are some examples of reflexive verbs. Mark portrayed himself as a confident student. The girls amused themselves with small talk. Deborah prepared herself for the new school. In these sentences, the reflexive pronoun himself, themselves, herself is the direct object. In the following sentence, the reflexive pronoun myself is an indirect object. I taught myself enough Spanish to chat with the exchange students. All the verbs in these examples, to portray oneself, to amuse oneself, to prepare oneself, and to teach oneself, are reflexive because they reflect the action back on the subject, whether directly or indirectly. Now let's review what we have learned about grammatical categories of verbs. Verbs are classified according to the following categories to describe the different ways in which they are used. Tense refers to the time in which an action or state of being occurs. Aspect expresses how the action or state of being described by a verb extends over time. Mood indicates the attitude of the speaker or the mood of a sentence. Voice indicates whether the verb is active or passive. So that wraps it up for today's video on the grammatical categories of verbs. If you have found this information helpful, be sure to like the video and click on the subscribe button for more videos like this one. Thank you so much for watching.